We're now going to look at example 2, which involves stratified random sampling. It says there were 128 builders, 40 engineers and 8 surveyors at a building site. A stratified sample was taken of the workers and there were 32 builders in the sample. It says in part A how many surveyors were in the sample. So remember, we take a sample from a population, and the population here is all of the people who are present at the building site. The population divides into groups, so there's a group of builders, a group of engineers and a group of surveyors, and we want to take a sample from each of those groups. And for every single group in the population, the sampling formula applies. So the sampling formula for every group, remember, is SSG, that's the sample size of the group, divided by the total sample size, or overall sample size, and that's equal to the population size of the group, PSG, over the overall or total population size, the actual population size. Now, remember, to use the sampling formula, we need to know 3 out of the 4 quantities, otherwise we're in trouble here. Now, it says how many surveyors were in the sample. So you would be right to put surveyors down and then write out the sampling formula. But you'll notice there's going to be a problem here. Because if we take the surveyors group, do we know 3 out of the 4 quantities? Well, it's asking us for the sample size of the group, so that's what we're looking for. We do know the population of surveyors. We know that there were actually 8 surveyors. And we can work out the overall population size, because if we add 128, 40 and 8 together, we'll get that. But the problem is we don't know the sample size. It doesn't actually tell us how many are in the sample in total. It just says a stratified sample was taken. So the problem is we can't go to the surveyors group first, because if we do, there's 2 unknowns. There's the unknown that we're trying to find, but then there's another unknown. So the big problem is we need to get the sample size. So the only way we're going to get that is if we go to a different group. So there must be a different group where we know 3 out of the 4 things and we can work out the sample size. The clue's in the question. It gives us a random bit of information about builders. It says there are 32 builders in the sample. That's the key bit. You're actually going to go to the builders group first, because in the builders group you will know 3 out of the 4 things. In all of the other groups you won't know 3 out of the 4 things. You'll only know 2 quantities. So we're actually going to go to the builders group. We're then going to write down everything that we know about the builders group. Now, it says there's 32 builders in the sample, so the sample size of the builders group, SSG, is 32. The overall sample size we don't know, but that is ultimately what we're trying to work out for now. The population size of the builders group is 128. And the overall population size is obviously all of the different groups of people added together. So we do know it. That's going to be 128 plus 40 plus 8. So you'll notice that it's only in the builders group that there's 3 quantities that we know. So what we're going to do then is we're going to sub in the quantities and then we're going to work out the sample size first. Once we know the sample size, we're then going to go back to the surveyors group and work out how many surveyors were in the sample, and then we're going to go back to the engineers group and work out how many engineers there are in the sample. So we have 32 over the overall sample size, and that's equal to 128 all divided by the total population size. That's 128 plus 40 plus 8, and that's going to give us 176. So let's cross multiply. So we're going to get 176 multiplied by 32. That's going to give us 5,632. And that's going to be 128 multiplied by the sample size. Divide both sides by the coefficient of the sample size. And then we're going to do a bit of cancelling. The 128's cancel. So go to the other side. 5362 divided by 128. And that's just going to give us 44. So the overall sample size is 44. So that's important. We need to work this out. Even though it didn't ask us for it, we need to work this out to enable us to work out how many surveyors there are in the sample and then how many engineers were in the sample. You need the overall sample size. So that's important. So now we're going to answer part A. So part A asks us how many surveyors were in the sample. So we're going to look at the group surveyors. And again, write out our formula. Sample size of group divided by sample size is equal to population size of group divided by population size. And again, we're looking for SSG. That's what we want. We want the sample size for the surveyors. How many surveyors go in the sample? The overall sample size is 44. We work that out above. The population size of the surveyors is 8. There's 8 in reality. And again, the overall population size again is 176. It's just the same as what we calculated up here. And again, the rest is easy now. Do you see the way it's only now that we can work out how many surveyors are in the sample? We couldn't have done that if we still didn't know the sample size. That's why we had to use the builders group at the beginning, because we knew 3 out of the 4 quantities in order to work out the sample size. So before cross multiply, sub in the values. So we've got SSG over 44, and that's equal to 8 all over 176. So cross multiply, we're going to get 176 SSG, and that's going to equal 44 multiplied by 8. And that's going to give us 352. Then again, we're going to divide both sides by the coefficient of the sample size of the group. We're going to divide both sides by 176. So again, 176's cancel, and we're left with the sample size of the surveyors group. And then that's equal to, go to calculator, 352 divided by 176, and that's just going to give us 2 exactly. Okay, so that is the number of surveyors which are selected for the sample. Okay, part B then, it's the same idea. Part B, if we go back to the original question, it says how many engineers were in the sample. So we're now going to go to the engineers group in part B. And we write out the sampling formula for the engineers. So SSG over SS That's equal to PSG over PS. And again, identify first what you want. We want the sample size of the engineers group. In other words, the number of engineers that are selected for the sample. So we want the top bit. And then identify what the other quantities are. So the overall sample size is 44, remember? We worked that out at the very beginning. The population size of the engineers group, if you go back to the question here, was 40. There's 40 actually there. And again, the population size is the same as what the population size was in the previous part, so it's 176. So let's sub in the quantities and then cross multiply to get the sample size for the engineer group. So we're going to get SSG over 44. And that's equal to 40 over 176. Again, we're going to cross multiply. So we're going to get 176 SSG. And then that's equal to 40 multiplied by 44. That's going to give us 1,760. And then again we're going to divide both sides by the coefficient of SSG. So divide both sides by 176. So 176's cancel over here, and we're left with SSG, the sample size of the engineer group, and then 1,760 divided by 176 will just give us 10. So in other words, we need to select 10 engineers from out of the 40 engineers to go into the sample. Okay, and that is example 2.